welcome again, everybody, to the Performance Office Sensible Assessment Series. My name is Abe Christ from the Performance Office. This is a new monthly community of practice where we're sharing ideas about implementing sensible and balanced assessment systems. And the purpose of this community of practice is to foster a deeper understanding of the variety of assessments and tools available to districts through the CSDE statewide sensible assessment system. And intended for the purposes of eliminating redundant assessments or trimming redundant assessments. In this meeting, we will share information regarding the sensible assessment system. We will also be joined by our district partners to share some of their practices. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the focus is on non-standard use of interims today. So thank you again to our colleagues in the districts who are joining us today from New Haven, Integrated Day Charter School, and Stanford. Also, thank you to my many colleagues who are on the call today supporting us, in particular, Christy Alberino, who's going to handle some of the presenting in a few minutes. And then thank you also for all you attendees making it out today. So a couple meeting reminders. The deck is posted in the chat. You can find it on the training page if you can't find it in the chat. All attendees are on mute. We will be monitoring the chat as best as we can. If we don't answer everything, you can always email us, and we will stop at a few times during the presentation using the raise hand feature if you want to ask questions verbally. A couple things about the Sensible Assessment webinars. These are the upcoming ones. In particular, we're looking for volunteers from districts for the April 24th and May 29th. Webinars. So if you'd like to attend, you can hit these links in the PDF and register for these or go to the CSDE calendar. Okay, today's agenda, a quick update on sensible assessments. Then we're going to pass the ball to our partner districts, New Haven, Integrated Day, Charter School in Stanford. Lisa, Deb, and Alec will all be joining us. I think they're all on the call. Then we're going to just summarize everything and provide some resources, and that's about it. So this is a snapshot of the Connecticut Sensible Assessment website that we're using now. So if you go to our website, this is what you'll see, and there will be links to the Summit of Assessment page from there. As a reminder, the purpose of this webinar is to help focus on some of the high quality tools that support instruction in the using interim blocks and formatives. As I mentioned earlier, this link here will lead you to our new web page if you hit it in the PDF. All right, speaking of the interims and summatives and formatives, I'm going to kick it over to Christy, who's going to tell us a little bit more about each of them. Christy?
You can see my screen?
Yep, you're good to go.
Excellent. Okay, so just real quick, we are, for those of you who might be questioning the difference between the formative assessment processes, interim assessments, and the summative, this is a breakdown of the differences. And today what we're really going to do, our three guests are going to focus on how we can incorporate formative assessment processes by using interim assessment items. So I think that'll make it really interesting. We're not trying to separate them. We'd like to combine those. And obviously the summative is the end of the year assessment. There are three different interims that we'll be talking about or referencing. You have Smarter Balance and NGSS. Smarter Balance are math and ELA. NGSS is all science. They're all available in the same platform, but when we are talking about the interim assessment item portal, which I'll get to in a minute, we are only referencing Smarter Balance, math, and ELA. And when we use interim blocks, we are talking about both focused interim assessment blocks and interim assessment blocks. They're both the same thing. The only thing that they delineate is the number of targets that are being assessed, but a block is a block. And on this slide, before I forget, the NGSS assessment overview, interim assessment overview, is hyperlinked to that, and Smarter Balance to the underlined Smarter Balance. So tools for teachers, which you can get into. using your Tide username and password. And our next presentation is about tools for teachers and the features. For today, all you need to know is that for math and ELA, there are resources and tools for teachers, and one of those that we're going to really be talking about today is the interim assessment item portal, which is a place where you can view all of the metadata, the items, the rubrics, the answer keys. They can be downloaded, viewed, saved. You can make your own answer keys. If you this is hyperlinked. If you click on the image on this slide, is a brochure explaining how to access this and to make an answer key. It is also in the resources at the end of this presentation. And if you're looking for science answer keys, they are currently housed in Tide in the General Resources tab, which has a drop down for interim assessment materials, and they're broken up by ELA and math as well as science. And that not only has the science answer keys, but exemplar and training sets for math and ELA open-ended items. All right. So we're going to start our presentation, and Lisa Bernard. Lisa is, do I see you, Lisa? Lisa is from New Haven, and she is going to start. She is the math. Lisa, you're the math coach?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so you're going to start us off.
All right, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa, and I am the instructional math coach over at John C. Daniels School in New Haven. And just here to talk to you a little bit about the way we are handling our IABs. This year is a little different. Every year before this year, we were using the IABs as formal assessments. And this year we're using them as instructional tools. And I'll talk a little bit more about that right now. Right now, our philosophy is that we want our students to be successful with test taking. And we all know that every time a kid sits down to take a test, there's so much anxiety. And it's mostly due to their math mindset. Being a math coach, I hear students all the time, as soon as that test pops up, math is too hard. I can't do this. It's so overwhelming. Where do I start? They don't know how to use some of the digital tools that are available on the Smarter Balanced test site. So it's just very anxiety provoking. And so we thought that we would use the IABs as learning tools and give our students the confidence needed to counteract some of that anxiety and then better prepare them for the Smarter Balanced assessments at the end of the year. So what we are doing now is we're exposing students in a lot of different ways to grade level content in the same way that they will see it on the Smarter Balanced assessments. So we want to expose the students to the formatting, to all of the logistics, anything that they will see on the Smarter Balanced test. We want to get them more familiar with that. There were a few different reasons for changing our way of looking at the IABs. The first reason was that we wanted to give students adequate exposure to the content and the formatting. We all know after looking at the Smarter Balanced assessments that they are definitely formatted differently than the way students see things in the classroom. So we want them to be familiar with that formatting. We want to give them support with the navigating and manipulating various SBA tools and the technical aspects of entering answers, because we are entering answers differently than just taking a pen and pencil test or even some of the online tests. We want to give them confidence to support that mindset that they can be successful. We want to give them familiarity, not only students, but teachers, because the teachers need to be really accustomed to the routines and processes that they have to do, like logging into the portal and monitoring student progress. And I love this last one. It's to allow for more reliable test scores. So often I would see students testing and they were, really confused about a certain concept that they see on the test. They knew the skill. They were just confused about the way the questions were asked, and they were confused about how they had to manipulate the various tools that they had to do to enter in data. So that we saw as giving us a little bit of unreliable data, because the students had the skills but didn't know how to show that on these tests. So what we do here in New Haven is we make it a requirement that the teachers have to administer the IABs twice a year, which would be in marking period 2 and marking period 3. And we have the freedom to administer them as much as we want, but they're required to do it twice. The coaches have prepared the slideshow. So when you go on the SBA portal and you go by grade and you can see all of the various tests associated with each grade, we took those slides, or we took those questions and we made them into slides. And the teachers here at our school have access to all of those slides. So we can pick apart the slides, use the whole slideshow. We can use them for morning meeting problems, small group work, do nows, classroom discussions, exit slips, homework centers, math activities, games. Any way we could expose these students to these questions, we are doing now. And we're teaching the content, and we're teaching them the formatting as well. This is just an example of a 3rd grade IAB slideshow. So all of these categories can be seen on the Smarter Balanced portal, but we've just taken every category and we've made slides, which are basically just a nice kid-friendly way of seeing the questions. And this gives the teacher the ability to project these slides in their classroom and either teach it whole group or teach it small group, but just having those slides projected in a way where we can really dissect them. And then once the review process has been completed, the teacher chooses the manner in which the test is administered. So after we do our do nows and our group work and our small group discussions and whole group, the teacher decides how the students want to take the test. We could log onto the SBA portal and take the test as a whole class. We can do it small group, we could do it individually, and different teachers in our school do it different ways, but it really doesn't matter at this point, because our job was to be able to teach them the content and to get them familiar with the questions. And then when they take the test, it is a good way for us to see how much they've absorbed, but it's not really a formal assessment at this point. We've done our job. What do we do with the data afterwards? We do use it to drive individual instruction, as we're using these slideshows and questions in our morning meetings and in our discussions. We're understanding as teachers where their weaknesses are, where their strengths are, where they need additional practice. So this does help us drive individual instruction, helps us create some small groups, and drive whole class discussion too, because sometimes the kids are stuck on one particular concept and it's the whole group, not just a few of them. All right. In this presentation, you're going to see just a few examples of what we get students familiar with. These are how we can help the students become more successful. So for every bullet, you'll see a quick example. So you're going to see how we can use digital tools, because on some of the questions, the students have to use the digital calculator and the drag and drop feature. The structure, how to answer all of the items in a table or a matrix. There's a language format, how to make sense of lots of text to read, understanding confusing language and sorting out the extraneous information, utilizing multiple problem-solving strategies in order to tackle the problems. Sometimes they need to create models, sometimes they need to draw pictures, sometimes they need to eliminate the options that don't make sense. And then a lot of the questions are critiquing the reasoning of others and justifying answers. And students really need guidance on how to do this. So my first example, I could pick a million of them, but I picked some of the major ones that we find are important. So for this question, it's enter the fraction that's equivalent to the expression. If the students aren't familiar with the fraction bar at the very bottom right-hand side of the slide, they will not be able to enter their answer accurately as a fraction. So teachers specifically have to explain to students that they need to press that button in order to enter their fraction. Second example is familiarity with utilizing the tools. They have to, in this example, they have to drag the greater than, equal sign, or less than sign in the middle of the two fractions to show which makes the comparison true. So if when we don't give the explicit instruction about how to use this drag and drop, there are students who are confused and get frustrated. The next slide is just an example of students making sure they are familiar with how to answer the question. They have to answer all of the statements. In the past, we've seen some students only answer the first row or the second row, or they're not quite sure how to answer it. So when the teacher puts this slide up, they give explicit instruction on how they should go about answering this question. Here's an example of familiarity with confusing language and lots of text to read. So here, if the student understands the rounding concept, but they don't know how to apply that knowledge to this kind of a question. Giving them familiarity with confusing language and lots of text to read. Just looking at this problem is intimidating, and especially too, this is I think a fourth grade question. So fourth grader looks at this, and even though they are familiar with plotting points on a coordinate plane, looking at this, they may not be able to apply that knowledge because they're unfamiliar with the way this question is worded. The next shows familiarity. We help students become more familiar with constructing models in order to interpret and solve problems. This is one of our questions, and students would be guided to perhaps use a number line and show on a number line how that can help them solve these types of problems. Sometimes students will make a table, draw a picture, but just this is one example of how we can help students become more familiar with breaking down this problem and using models to solve it. I made this its own category because anyone who has looked at the Smarter Balance questions knows that there's lots of information, lots of text, and students need to have a good way of sorting out all of the extraneous information. So here's just a few examples. This slide makes me just very overwhelmed, and I'm an adult. So think about if an elementary student or a middle school student sees this, sometimes they don't know where to begin. So our teachers break down, teach them, where do we start? How do we tackle this kind of question? What's most important? What information is not important at all? And then how do we look at the answer choices and figure out what is best? So it's a process. Same thing with this slide. There's a lot of ways that you can go about solving it, but just looking at this slide for the first time without any guidance or teacher thoughts or classroom discussion really about what are the best ways to tackle a problem like this. A student sees this for the first time and may not be able to feel comfortable, at the least. Here's an example of giving students familiarity with critiquing the reasoning of others. Again, sometimes students understand very well how to plot points on a coordinate plane and how to identify them. They know how, but to look at some of these options and be able to figure out which answer choice makes the most sense, it looks like it's a pretty arduous process. So when we look at a slide like this, a question like this, we break it down for the kids and help them understand how to make sure that they're choosing the right answer choice. Same thing with this. Students may know how to multiply fractions, but when you look at the answer choices, a student might know what that number is, but now look at the answer choices and figuring out which one makes sense is pretty hard. Is a pretty hard task. So we help students understand how to critique these answers and figure out which answer makes the most sense. And another example of with familiarity with structure, how to understand how to enter answers. Because when a student looks at a question like this for the first time, it might be a bit confusing trying to figure out. Thank you. Trying to figure out how to answer this. So we will give our students advice on how to tackle that. And finally, familiarity with how to analyze text and eliminate the options that make sense. I mentioned that before. They may know how to do perimeter, but when you look at the answer choices, students are saying like, what is it? I don't know. I know what the perimeter is, but so it's just a strategy, and students need to understand these strategies. So those are some of the examples that I put together. And things that we do to help prepare our students, not necessarily teaching to the test, although we're teaching to the format of the test. We are helping students become more familiar with the formatting, more familiar with the language, so that if they have the skill, they can show it off and do well. If they don't have the skill, they won't, but at least if they are getting the questions wrong, it's because they don't have the skill, not because they're confused about how it is presented. Or the lack of some of the training that, or lack of knowledge on how to use the system, manipulating the system.
Lisa, thanks for sharing a lot. I know a couple questions have come in. And by the way, your timing is beautiful. You're right on time, so thank you. Let's indulge here for a minute, and we have a couple questions that have come in. Christina, I'm not entirely sure of your question, so maybe you can come off mute on that one. Anne had a question, and I'll just read this to you, Lisa, so you're not working in the chat. Do you create additional problems in the most challenging format for teachers to use in their math instruction? That's the question. Yes, actually we do. Every morning for the first 15 minutes of the day, we do what's called morning math. And it is, and another person asked about the interactiveness of it. We do have the ability to have the slides be interactive. So we can use any of the problems that we see on the Smarter Balance portal or any of the slides that we've created for our teachers, and we can put them into this morning meeting slide, which is interactive. So we can show them exactly how they would have to do that on the Smarter Balance test. Like,
Lisa. It's Christina, sorry. Yeah, that was my question based on that piece, which was when the teachers have that slide up, are they able to actually click into the boxes or move use the fraction bar tool?
Mm-hmm. Not on the slides that not on the normal slides, but if a teacher actually takes that slide and puts it into our morning meeting, then we can develop it ourselves. So that is not interactive. The slides that we use, the examples that I showed you are not interactive, but we could manually make them interactive by plugging them into our morning meeting slides, and the teachers can show them, because we have interactive boards, so we can just
and then you would, so if you're using an interactive whiteboard or something, then you could add in the comparison symbols or something like that, or in that sense, but they're not actually linked to the site. I know one of the things that we've tried to do is link the practice problems in, because that goes right to the portal, but the slide decks are beautiful. Nice job.
Thank you.
Lisa, thank you again, and Christina and Ann, thanks for your questions. We're gonna keep on rolling here. We're trying to stick to the hour marker, but Lisa, thank you again, and we're gonna turn the ball over.
I also believe that the presenters can answer questions in the chat. So you can go ahead, Lisa. I know there's one from Ann that you might want to just answer right in the chat.
Will do.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. Appreciate it. So I'm going to turn over to Deb Allard from Integrated Day Charter School. Deb, thanks again for joining us, and it's your stage.
All right, thanks for having me. As Abe said, my name is Debbie Allard. I'm the Assistant Director at the Integrated Day Charter School in Norwich. Some similarities to Lisa in that the rationale for why we started essentially gamifying the IABs was to promote exposure to question types. And we're also a responsive classroom and an integrated arts school. So we do things like learning buddies with different grade levels, all school where there's big assemblies and morning meetings. So trying out the IAB questions in different and fun formats was something that we were going for. So we essentially found different ways to gamify the FIABs and IABs primarily. There's going to be one slide on NGSS content, but it's primarily a math and ELA focus. So as Lisa said, there's a lot of different question types that you find on the SBAC. There's about 12 different question types. So you can, there's, if I were to, I don't know if no, I can't click on that. If you click on that, you actually get to tools for teachers. And once you select the item types, I highly recommend, it's just a really good exposure for your teachers and self to look at the different types of questions. Some of them like this, like the match interaction or the hot text or grid items, are ones that we weren't necessarily seeing with We Use Pearson and Visions, or, you know, within our ELA programs that we use. We weren't seeing exposure to the type of questions that we saw on the test. So we wanted to take any variability out with students not knowing how to answer these and just getting some safe exposure to them, taking away that test anxiety, as she said as well. So if we go to the next slide. Sorry. As I said, the Tools for Teachers has been the most useful platform for us to be able to gamify the FIABs because, well, the answer keys are very nice, especially for like the 7th and 8th grade math questions. And then the level of difficulty and the types of questions. So you can kind of see that here where the degrees of knowledge, the difficulty, answer keys can all be found. So it can kind of be a quick version of what you need to turn these questions and assessments into gamified platforms. So when we use, I'm going to be going into the games in a few minutes, but when we look at how to gamify these, we either use the Tools for Teachers, as you're seeing here, or once an IAB has been given, as many of you are probably aware, it sort of analyzes it for you in a really surface way in terms of the 5 questions of strength and 5 questions of weakness that the test results provided. So we tend to go with the 5 questions of weakness as question types that we put into the gamified platforms so that we're making sure the students have increased exposure to those, because then we ask, is it the question type? Is it some gaps that they have? Is it lack of exposure? I think we can go to the next slide. And the other piece, this is less about the gamifying, but the other piece that we've really found success with is the individual students get really excited about whether it be iReady or whatever the assessment they're taking result is. So we've kind of used the IABs or the FIABs as a conferring platform. So we show the whole class that they're composite, but then we've also been seeing individual kids come up to check that and using it as a goal setting opportunity for after we play some games and get more exposure, and if we use these as a pre-test to see what the following composite is. Again, looking at the questions that give the students the trickiest time has been very helpful. And not only that, but really when we look at those 5 strongest, we're often asking ourselves why. Is it that the content has been really well aligned vertically? Is it that the content we've covered so far is, if I'm looking at math, really numbers and operations heavy, algebra heavy? Why? So we're going to take a look at some of these and how we've gamified them at IDCS. So we can move on. Yeah, so it's like the value of taking the test and I guess making it fun. All right, we can move on. So the first and really effective for discourse tool that we've used is concentric circles. So it allows the students to share ideas and strategies and let students gain perspectives. So what it is basically an inner circle and an outer circle. And the students have a partner that they face, and they're given a certain amount of time to solve a problem. They might be given whiteboards and markers as well. And then they might rotate problems. So also the inner circle might have one purpose and the outer circle could have a different purpose. For example, the inner circle could be the ones answering the questions. The outer circle can be the ones agreeing and affirming, or could be the ones disagreeing and sharing why. And then that really promotes that student dialogue with one another. And I also wanted to add before we move on, this slideshow was one that we actually did with our grades 2 to 8 teachers. So it was a lot of fun to actually play these games together. We got pretty competitive. We did prizes and things like that. It was it's very revealing about a person and their competitive nature when you do these things. So we can move on. So I just added some example questions that we've used in these concentric circles. So one of our core tenets at the school is research as well. So there was about 8 choices on this particular question where students had to identify the 2 most credible and trustworthy resources. And some of the conversation we heard was really interesting. So you could see they want the reason why B's are declining. And the third answer is correct, but some of the students were choosing like answer 2, for example, because they got caught up on the new shelters will better protect bees. So that's where they got caught up on the bee decline when it wasn't one of the 2 most appropriate choices. So that dialogue created some really good conversation and had students arguing in a constructive way. You can move on. This was a math one where we used whiteboards and markers. So they had to explain and justify the equivalent expression, but then we had one partner give the answer and one partner give the justification, and the other partner had to work out the answer and then talk about any alignment they saw or misalignment, and then we had them do another like problem because this one actually had them tripped up, and we realized we weren't sure if we hadn't taught bases and exponents enough, or if they hadn't seen it in a while, or if they really weren't where they needed to be. So we can keep going. Another similar question with research and the 2 pieces of information. This tripped kids up too. A lot of them chose the second answer because it talks about Thomas Edison and the influence in his life, and some of our students knew the inventions and his mass communication inventions, so they chose, because he was nearly deaf by adulthood, they thought it was as like a compensatory thing, but the answers weren't correct. So just creates interesting thinking that as an adult I wasn't there, but they certainly were. So it's a good platform for discussion. And keep going. Here's another math example. And you can see a lot of these also are exposing the students to the different types of questions. So whether it be the true false, it's choosing to, that's been really helpful because we're doing it in a safe way and they don't even realize they're being exposed to the questions, honestly. But it is getting them to think that, oh, okay, I can choose more than one answer, or I have to be thinking about this, so I provide the correct answer to my partner and can justify it. So I think reading directions on these has been really helpful also. So this is the only NGSS one I included, and it's less gamifying and more just probably the most effective tool that I can't take credit for, that our science 7th and 8th grade science teacher has found and shared with our 4th and 5th grade science teachers, where she uses groupthink. She was noticing that the students were almost becoming paralyzed by the difficulty of some of these questions, and then navigating the 2 scroll bars and just the usability of the program as well as the challenge. I mean, some of these are really, really difficult. I don't know if any of you have ever tried them. I encourage you to do so. if you haven't, because I think, I don't know, myself, I had to use groupthink to solve some. So, so what we put students into groups and not always assign them roles. Sometimes they organically assign themselves roles, but we encourage one person to take on the role of the reader and information disseminator. We encourage someone to be the mathematician. We encourage someone to be the recorder, because then they have exposure to these problems within a group, and it really highlights the students' strengths, but also exposes them to their weaknesses by watching a peer or being able to talk these out with a peer. And they can't not be part of the conversation. So usually we have 2 adults in the room when we're doing these. So we hold them accountable for the conversation they're having with one another. We give each of them a different color marker, so they're accountable for their part of whether it be the comprehension piece and underlining the most important parts in the questions, or working out the math, creating a model, whatever it might be. So that has just been something that the science questions can be really scary when you first look at them. So taking that scare factor out of it and allowing students to collaborate has been helpful. We can move on. 4 corners. I played this a lot as a kid. This is probably best used. We use it a lot in morning meeting for multiple choice answers. So it's best when there's like a 4-choice answer. We read the questions one at a time and assign A, B, C, D corners of the room. And some classes, this is really successful with, because students are very self-assured and they feel good about going to different corners than others. If they haven't been, we give them the little mini stickies and they have to write down their answer before they go to a corner, so we don't get the mob mentality of like, oh, hey, Susie, she's really smart, I'm going to go to the corner that she's going to, or what have you. So that's been really, it's been a really fun activity. And we also have added a part where each corner that has people in it has to choose a spokesperson and argue why they chose the corner they did, or justify why they chose the corner they did. After that justification, they can change people can change corners, and then we reveal the answer. So it's kind of fun. You can move slides. So these are just some examples that this, like I said, was from the staff PD. So it can be anything from ELA with sentence punctuation. That we've done it with comprehension questions. You can keep moving if you want, if you would. This one was interesting because it's a 7th grade math question about sample size, and all of the students went to one of the 2 corners, either 30 students in 7th grade, which is choice C, or 30 students in tech class, which is choice A. And then they had a little bit of a debate about it, and they ended up all landing on C, because somebody pointed out that the tech class would be a biased sample size, because if you're looking to start a computer club, then you have a pretty homogeneous population there. So just an example of how it's worked. Can keep going. Heads Up is a game that we primarily play with vocabulary because there are a tremendous amount of content words in ELA, math, and science that students are required to know. And what we realized was the tremendous amount of multiple meaning words for our ML students, and or taking out the variability again of, do they know that vocabulary? Because a lot of our ELA and math programs use consistent vocabulary throughout, but are there any other words that might have a similar meaning that might be used on the assessment is helpful as well. So a word that comes to mind straight away is table. So for ML students, a table could be, even for our regular population, you can table something, which means to stop talking about it. You can sit and work at a table, or you can have a table that you might use in science and math. So we were realizing that exposure to these words in a gamified platform is really helpful. You can flip the slide. So these are these are some of the grade 5 words that are math construct relevant for math that we might put on. Some of them are not appropriate for cards, and some of them are, but having these and having them put them on their forehead and someone else explaining them to them is a fun way to, and they can't explain it in a non-academic way. For example, table would have to be a chart or a graph that you might see on a math question or something like that. You can keep going. So these are just examples of the lists that we used to create these. That was my timer. Sorry.
Did you want, Deb, did you want to play the video?
You can if you want, just so people see an example of it besides me going like this. So these are some of our 4th graders.
5 to 7 sentences. What? 5 to 7 sentences. Paragraph? Yeah.
Nice.
So that's just a quick, but they would each have stacks of, the students have stacks of words. How I did it with our staff is each staff group got a stack of words, and the group who got through the words the quickest got the prize. It might just be kudos in your own classrooms, but we take the 5. This is where the 5 trickiest problems typically come into play, where we do my favorite no. My favorite no, probably a lot of you have heard of it, but it is an activity when we see a student, or I should say a class of students, getting a similar problem wrong a lot of the time. We will give them one of those problems intentionally and have them do it on note cards. I always have them do it in the same color pencil or pen so that they cannot be identified. They don't put their name on it, or they can put their name on the back, and they try to solve the problem. We then, oh, thanks Deirdre for linking that. So Deirdre just linked the vocabulary for the construct relevant vocab in the chat. So for these, we would give them a problem. This one was on combining like terms. They would all have to solve the problem, and we find patterns within the incorrect. So usually I would give them a problem like this one day. I would look through the patterns of error. I would then pull out my favorite no's. And for this one, it happened to be the distributive property on the last parentheses. That was the error. Instead of doing 6x minus 2, they did 6x minus 1, which made the problem incorrect. But once we can identify these patterns, then students can, give each other feedback on why they think it's wrong. And a lot of them end up loving being the wrong one. Like, can you use my example in a safe way eventually? We've also created a lot of Jeopardy games and Kahoots based on, and we take them similar to how I saw Lisa kind of put them on slides. We'll put the pictures right on a Kahoot or right on the Jeopardy format, so that they actually see the question type and that they can answer them in a group format. Which has been, these kids love these, and we've done these at All School, which is our whole community assembly, where kids are playing Jeopardy versus one another using IAB questions, but they don't even know they're doing it sometimes. So it's been kind of neat. And then this year is the first year. So last year, I think I did this presentation the first time, or we exposed this to staff the first time. And this year we've started to pull in our specials teachers. So our gym teacher has actually created colored cards, 2 different colored cards. I think they're green and orange, and they have SBAC questions on them and or vocab along with answers. And they play a tic-tac-toe relay in gym class, which has been kind of neat. And then she also has developed scavenger hunts and brings them outside. We are located on the Thames River and have a pretty big property, and they'll do scavenger hunts to find questions and answers and things like that. So we've dedicated time for our arts teachers to meet with our grade level teachers to create opportunities to look at the standards and look at areas of strength and weakness and how we can better integrate them into our specials classes so that students are getting exposure throughout. And the teachers have been really excited about that and have been, I don't know, they really took it on and have been doing a really awesome job with this. So it's happened. Even one of the teachers' SLOs or goals for the year is about multiplication through song making for music. So it's just that integration opportunity has been really helpful for our teachers as well. And I think that's my last slide. Oh, no, the only other, this is not about gamifying at all, but something that we found was teaching the students how to fold their scratch paper. I know that sounds really silly, but we collected scratch paper for IABs one day, and it was like just this mishmash, and the problems were like melding into each other, and work from one problem was crossing over into another. So just teaching our students how to fold the paper in half and making 6 to 8 boxes has been like transformational, because then we teach them how to work in designated areas. So it's just probably a silly trick, but one that's been really helpful in helping our kids to stay in their box and organize their work. So I encourage all of you, it's been really fun to do this with staff and then therefore see them do it with their students, and work together and share the information with one another. So I encourage you to do the same.
Right. Deb, thank you so much. There's some awesome stuff there, so thanks a lot. And I think a couple questions came in, but I think we've been handling them through the chat. And we'll, does anybody have any? I know we're a little bit over, so if you have a 4 o'clock dentist appointment or something, just go ahead and blame the performance office, because we're going to go a little bit over here, but please indulge with us. Any questions for Deb? I think we're good. Okay. Again, thanks, Deb. I'm gonna, next up, final up is Alec Iogman from Stanford. Alec, I'm gonna turn the ball over to you.
Thank you, Abe. Appreciate it. I'm Alec Iogman. I'm the coordinator of technology integration and online assessment. Now, before I got that very wordy title, I was a 1st and 2nd grade teacher. I also served as the K-5 elementary math curriculum specialist and then the K-12 science curriculum specialist. Now, the reason I'm kind of backtracking to what I've done is my experience led me to be able to collaborate with various departments. And even though I'm on the assessment side, we were able to develop practices with our teaching and learning department that bridge the gap. Now, if some of you are from smaller districts, this may not be as big of a deal, but we have 16,500 students. We have probably about 500 teachers in the testing grades or more. And so when we present, we have to do a lot of follow-up, a lot of coaching, a lot of accountability, because sharing a good idea, maybe 10, 15, 20% of teachers will take that good idea and implement it. We need to follow up with stable processes over years to roll things out. So that's why I'm mentioning it. So if you are on a curriculum committee, if you write curriculum, if you are actually a district person who's in charge of curriculum or implementation, this is for you. If you're a teacher and these your district folks aren't doing some of these elements, bug them about it. Go ahead, it'll work out. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's very important to, especially in a larger district, to create a collaborative relationship between your assessment departments and your teaching and learning department, so that you have to have the same goals, regular meetings about collaboration, figuring out ways one department can support the other. Hugely important. The next key to success, and you've seen the previous presenters who basically showed you the items and how to deliver it in the lesson. My part is to show you how to structure it in a greater sense across a district. So in order to really bring these items into the daily classroom instruction, you need to have really good mapping of standards and units. You need to have good pacing guides, and you need to do these, create these things through curriculum work. it's very important through that curriculum work to create a library of easily accessible items, as has been shown. So now you know where to get them, but then you have to kind of put them in a place where teachers can access them in a very easy, ready way. And that's where the curriculum committees come in again. They can embed them into the lessons depending on how you organize units. The last thing is developing consistent practice of embedding these things. That comes through coaching. You need to have curriculum coaches, or however your district structures it, come into the classroom, model these things for your teachers. And the last part, it has to be embedded into your administrators' observations. So when a principal comes in, they should be able to look at a pacing guide and roughly tell whether, hey, you know what, this lesson, this is where NGSS or SBA piece of content is usually embedded. So they should be able to expect to see these things. And usually administrators at the beginning of the year, when they're meeting with teachers, they have focuses. And this could be a focus for a year or two where, hey, when I'm coming to observe, I also want to see embedded content. And after a year or two, then it becomes organic and you don't have to do these kinds of structured things as much. But this is kind of the whole picture. You really need curriculum work, you really need observations for accountability, and you really need coaching to show teachers how to do this. The gamification element is wonderful. Some teachers may need help with that. You may need technology assistance to really show them how to do it in a proper way. Next slide, please. So this is an example of what we created in the district and have been using for a number of years. Pretty simple thing. We took a pacing guide, as you could see the dates on there, and then we went into our math program, and our math program listed in each lesson the dominant strands of that lesson. And so we just put them on the pacing guide. And so now what we could easily do is say, okay, hey, look at this September 26th, and there's a little asterisk to that next to that lesson. That's a 2-day lesson for us. That's a perfect place to embed a question that is of that 5 NBT strand. And so that is how you embed it, right? So if you guys don't have pacing guides, if you don't have these strands written out, that would really help. So teachers and curriculum committees know where to bring these elements in. And what you could do further is, if you kind of have a curriculum map for somebody, you could even link some of these activities like the ones you saw that were presented. Now, you could also tell that this particular unit, Unit 2, is very heavy on numbers base 10. So one other thing that we've been trying to do is, if there is an IAB done, it could follow this unit. So on the left-hand side in green, you'll see one of the IABs highlighted. That's the number in operations in base 10 IAB. So after you're done with this unit 2, this could be a perfect place to schedule in your assessment calendar where follow this unit. This is a good time to do that IAB. I know one of the presenters mentioned there's an expectation of doing it, let's say 2 times per year. You can make that even stronger by assigning a time or a day where all schools are doing this. You can also stress test your systems, your Wi-Fi, your testing coordinators at the schools. You can already start handing out the the SACIDs to see if that process is there. So this is just all part of a big integrated system. Now, the next piece, I'm going to throw it over to Christy Alberino. She's just going to model really quickly how you can search the item banks and filter, so that if you are looking for a particular strand or even a particular difficulty, that you'll be able to find that. And once you have it, you can download it, link it, and make it easily accessible to teachers. Hopefully that was short and sweet. I know we were on a timeline, but that's my piece. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer after Christy's part.
All right, so I don't know if everybody saw, I started with the Connecticut portal. I chose tools for teachers under Smarter Balance, and now it's not logging. Okay, not sure. And to the left, if I scroll over, is the new interim assessment item portal. It is, I don't know why I'm not logging in. It might be because I'm doing too many things at one time. Okay, so the interim assessment item portal gives me the opportunity to choose the items that you saw in the other presentation. So, for example, we've been talking a lot about math. So I can choose my grade, I can choose math, all of the math interim items for every single math interim for that grade are now shown as I scroll down. I can go ahead and pick, Alec, I'm sorry, was that a 1 or a 4 for the claim?
I believe it was a 1.
Okay, and then all of my content strands are listed to the left. So we were looking at numbers base 10, for example. So here's a numbers base 10. All of the items are here. If I don't want to look at them in this particular way, I can put them into this format. I can sort by difficulty level. I can look at them. The standards are there, the strand that you're working with. And what I can do is add items to my queue, go to the print cart, and it will give me the option to print these items with or without the answer keys. And it then is saved to a PDF that has the answer keys with the metadata, the item metadata on one page, and each of the items that are available for to practice that particular skill. And they can be downloaded as a PDF. They can be printed out. There's no more of this screenshots for everyone. I know Alec mentioned that he's lost years screenshotting items. Was there anything else that you wanted me to show, Alec?
I think that's perfect. And just I want to call out the fact that you could sort all these by difficulty so that if you are beginning to embed a particular domain or strand and it's at the start of the year, or this is the first time that element is being taught, you start with the easy ones. And when you're closer to the assessments, you can go ahead and use the moderate or difficult ones. And the other point I wanted to make is at the end of a school year, is a great time to continue to do this. There's no reason why after the testing has been completed in 3rd grade, you can't still embed this. And I think that's the difference between teaching to the test and just making this as part of the curriculum, right? You teach the harder embedded problems at the end of 3rd grade, 4th graders are going to be better prepared, and so on. So that's why you want to put in the pacing guide for the entire year. It's not teaching to the test, it's preparing students for that different language. For example, we use everyday math. And one of the common criticisms is the language of the SBAC is significantly different from that. And so we want to expose our students to it. So you embed it in the curriculum. And thank you, Christy. That was a wonderful demonstration.
Excellent. I think we had
Alec.
some.
Yeah, Alec, thanks. And sorry to interrupt you there, Christy. Yeah, I think Christy has a few more slides and we're almost to the back end. I know there's a couple questions that have come into the chat, but we'll try to address those because I know it's a couple minutes after 4 already. So Christy, I know you got a couple more there.
Okay. So we had a question about how to find the NGSS answer keys. You're going to go into Tide, log into Tide through the Connecticut portal, and in the top right-hand corner, you're going to see general, I think it's general materials, general information. There's a drop down. There's a slide with a picture of it in our presentation. And there's a drop down and you basically have to download. The file has to be opened. It's huge. And so it's been compressed. But it is, that's where the answer keys are available. If you haven't taken the NGSS, if you have taken the NGSS or the math or ELA blocks, the answers are available in the centralized reporting system. So you'll be able to see those, but you have to take a block in order to see the answer in the centralized reporting system. All right, Deirdre, are there any questions that I need to address as we run through the summary? And I see Jeffrey jumping.
I think we're good.
We're caught up? Okay, yeah. So basically, what I heard and what I read prior to this, looking at all the slides, there are so many ways that you can use the interims. They're so valuable, but it doesn't have to be a very standard way of using them. You can still use them informally. And while we really do encourage this, which is why it was the very first presentation that we're doing, we do want to remind you, they don't get posted, they don't go home. They're not printed out and sent to everybody. They are semi-secure in some ways, but we want to encourage you to use them in non-standard ways and make them accessible to everyone. We have so many resources. We have a whole page on the interim assessments that not only has a booklet in there that explains everything from start to finish about interims, but don't miss that resources tab that's next to it on the left that will bring you to every single resource. Anything we reference in that booklet, by the way, on the main page is hyperlinked in the booklet. I did put in here about using the interim assessment item portal and some access to Smarter Balance tools for teachers. And this will come up multiple times, but there is not one, but now 2 research papers showing the value of interims. Kids who are taking 4 or more interims during the year are having significantly improved test scores. And that was shown in 2020 and has been reiterated with the research from 2022-23. And that includes using interims informally. It's that exposure to them. We have some videos using an interim playlist. There's a back to school playbook for Smarter Balance that incorporates some of that. On the program portal, we have the NGSS and Smarter Balance interim overview. There are 2 links to assessment resources for NGSS, with a resource library, and those can be helpful if you're looking for more ways to integrate science in these less standard ways. And if you have questions, I do appeals, I do interims, and if you're looking at giving interims, if you're looking for ELA content, you can also reach out to me. Science content, reach out to Jeff Gregg, who's been answering questions, and Jen Michalek, who's not on this presentation, but she is our math expert. So math content can be fielded over to Jen Michalek can field those. And you're welcome to reach out to us if I don't know the answer and you send me an email, I will find a person who does. And I want to thank Abe. I know you're going to jump in here and say thank you too, but Alec and Lisa and Deb were absolute rock stars. I loved this presentation, and I thank you for joining us. Abe, did you want to?
No, well said, Christy. Thanks. Yeah, cheers to everybody, our presenters and our attendees. Thank you very much. And if anybody wants to join us at our next few webinars, please let us know. And Lisa, Deb, and Alec, you're welcome back too if you want to come back. So thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.